Hi, this is John for Revit for Interior Designers, and I'm going to demonstrate the column command in Revit. I've created a very simple floor plan with column grid lines, horizontal and vertical. And under the Architecture tab, there is a column feature here that I'll go into describing in more detail. And they have two types, column architectural and a structural column. So let's begin with architectural column. I'm going to choose this option here, and immediately under properties, the product type appears here as a default 24 by 24 column size. Under the rectangular column family, there's three types. This is the first type under the type selector. You can choose the other sizes if you like. And with this being chosen, I can place the column in my space. You can see that the mouse cursor defaults to the center of the column, so placing the column on the grid line is fairly easy. Or I can place it near a wall here, and you'll notice that they'll tend to snap to the wall. Or you can place it out in the open. It'll continue adding more columns until you hit escape. Once to cancel the command, second to bring you back to the default ribbon. And very quickly, I can go look at the 3D view here and see the columns in my space. In this particular project, the columns are slightly taller than my walls. If you look at one wall, the wall properties, the top of the wall goes up to the second level, and it's offset by -1 foot. The walls are 1 foot below what's considered level 2. So I could add that parameter to the columns. For example, this column here is simply rising up to the second floor, but it's even with the second floor here. Now, given that these three columns are the same, you can very quickly select all three by selecting one, right-click, select all instances, which means copies, columns that are similar, that are visible in my view or in the entire project, assuming you have multiple floors and you're selecting every single column in the entire building. But I'm going to use the visible in view command, and they're all selected. Therefore, in this menu, I can take care of three birds with one stone by changing this offset here, the -1 foot, like the walls, hit apply, they all become the same height. And you'll notice at the same height, the walls tend to blend in with the columns. This is a feature of architectural columns. When you go to plan view, they do the same thing. Now, if you don't have a column of a certain size you're after, let's say, for example, this column should be a 12 by 12 column, and you notice in your type selector, there is no 12 by 12 option, you could make a new column. For instance, in that situation, you would simply take any column, hit edit type, and again, you're in the rectangular column family, and there's certain types. There's three types. You've got this one selected currently. And if you want to make a change here, you'll wind up manipulating the 24 by 24 everywhere in your entire project. So to avoid that, we're going to duplicate this column and make our own. For example, we'll make a 12 by 12 column, and I'll add my initials to make it appear unique in the list of columns so I know which ones are mine and custom. So I hit OK here, and then you'll notice I've added a new type of column to the list. And very quickly, I can see that it's custom. And under dimensions, I can very quickly say that the column is 1 foot by 1 foot, and the top of the column is -1 foot offset at the top. So if the columns rise to the second level, they automatically drop a foot at the top, which will match the walls. So if I take that information and save it here, and hit OK, I get an error message. Evidently, there's something about this column it doesn't like. So with these kind of error messages, you typically delete that type, edit it again, and try to determine potentially what's going on here. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate it again. I'll call it a 12 by 12 column. Add my initials. I will simply just use a 1 foot depth, But then let me leave this alone for now and determine if maybe that has an effect on the type. If I hit apply, it'll accept it. So for whatever reason, there may have been an issue with the offset at the top. But nonetheless, at any given time, I can select on this column. And you'll notice, because I've changed it from this type to this new type called 12 by 12, it already had the parameter top offset -1 foot. So potentially maybe that's where the conflict arises. But now you've got a new column that you can add anywhere in the project you like. So I'm going to delete these columns. I'm going to leave this one on the screen so you can see the difference. So next type of column is a structural column. So if I launch that column, let's note the differences. If I look in the type selector, there's only 2 types of columns, and by default they're showing these I-beams, a 1033 and a 1049. And I would not like an I-beam in my project. I'd like to have a round concrete column. Well, that being said, neither one of these are going to be useful to me. So rather than try to use something that I don't like, and I will not be able to modify and make it any different using edit type, what I want to do then is load a new column type from a library of columns that are available. So in structural columns, you'll notice that there's a few new buttons here. There's load family. You can create a vertical column or a slanted column, and there's a tool here to add the columns to the structural grid automatically. Revit will actually locate where these 2 grid lines intersect and place a column there automatically using that button there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a family first. I'm going to open load family, and I'm going to try to find a family with a group of columns that I like and add those columns into my type selector so they appear in this list. So I'm going to use load family. I'm going to scroll down here and find structural columns. These are all default Revit folders installed on your computer when you install Revit. I'm going to find structural columns. I've got various types I can choose. I'm going to choose, for example, a concrete column. There's different shapes and sizes. Each one has a little preview window. Here's a round column, for example. I'm going to choose that column there, RFA for Revit Family File, which is a collection of Revit models that you can use in your project. When I double click, it takes a second to load. And then you'll notice what happens in the properties. So notice the column got added to my cursor because I was in the process of adding a column. It loaded that column into my cursor. And notice under the type selector, I now have a new family called concrete round column. And that family came with 4 different columns that I can use in my project. By default, it used a 12-inch, but I can change it to any other size if I like. For example, there. Now, rather than place these columns in my scene at the grid lines, I'll use a different tool for that. But for the present moment, I'll just simply add it here in the wall, so you can see the difference between these 2 types of columns. So you'll notice here, I'm going to cancel out with the modify command or escape. Notice here that the column is inside the wall, and rather than blending with the wall, they're completely separated from the wall. They're distinct from the wall. If I look in the 3D view here, you'll notice the same thing happens here. This column is intersecting that wall. So these kind of columns are different than architectural columns. There is no blending that's happening with structural columns. This column here is going up to the 2nd level. I'm going to subtract a foot to make it even with the height of the wall. But nonetheless, you'll see they're distinct from the wall. And in fact, it looks like a mistake where I'm missing boundaries between the wall and the column where they intersect. So whereas architectural columns cleaned up fairly nicely, structural columns do not. To integrate these two pieces together and make them look more appropriate, you simply click on the structural column, use the join command right here, and join this column to this wall. And notice, as if it's an architectural column, it'll cut an opening out and place the column in the center there. So when you return to plan view, you'll see that they look like they belong together because I've used the join command to make them appear like an architectural column. Doing the same thing here, something seems to have been manipulated here with the tool, probably because I selected this wall. I'll do it again. I'll do the modify join command, and I'll tell this wall to join with this architectural column. And you see there's no means of selecting the architectural column because they're already joined together. By default, they're joined together. Although because I've joined the structural with the wall, it added a boundary here. Unfortunately, it did the same thing, escape, to the architectural column, where normally there's no border here. But again, this doesn't really affect your model at all. You're typically working in plan view in any event, and these look like they're combined together. So no harm, no foul there. Going back to the column command under Architecture tab, here as a structural column, again, the ribbon, because I'm launching a concrete round column, it gives me modify place structural column tab here that's activated, and some choices. It assumes I want a vertical column, and I do. I can now use the add grids command. If I use add grid command because it's looking to place a column in the scene, if I use this button and then simply select all the structural grid lines, in this case, dragging from right to left is the best method. Simply drag through the screen and select all the architectural all the column grid lines here. It automatically places the structural grids at the intersections. If I hit finish, no columns were added. Do you want to exit? No. I'm going to do it again because it lost the command. So I'm going to go backwards here, select those. The columns are in place. Don't click on the screen because it'll unselect the command and you'll lose the columns. So this time I'm not going to click on the screen. I'm simply going to choose finish. And now they're located, and it continues to add more columns until you escape, and you leave the modify place structural tab. Escape, and you've canceled out. And now, if you look at your drawing in 3D, you've got all your columns here. And again, because I've started a standard of column tops being 1 foot below the second level, to make that happen, I would choose one type of column, right-click, and I would select all the instances, which are basically saying select all the copies that I can see in the view. The view I'm in is the 3D view. Grab all the visible columns, and then simply come into here, top offset, and make them all -1 foot. If they were all the same at the beginning, this would have gave me an answer, but since some weren't, some were dropped from the second level, some were taller, 1 foot taller, that was cleared out. So I physically added -1 foot here. It tells me it's a vertical column. I click on the screen, and now I have structural columns and architectural columns in my space. And as I go back to the floor plan and grab a structural grid line and drag it over, you'll notice that the columns are assigned to the grid line. So any of these adjustments will keep them together. If I grab this column here and pull it off the wall, it will detach itself from the wall, but it doesn't drag the wall with. if I happen to grab this wall and drag it below that column, again, column stays behind. It doesn't come with. This is a message telling me that things used to be joined together, and here you are changing that understanding. This column and this wall were joined a second ago, and I just broke them apart. It's warning me that I'm about to do that, and I can unjoin that. Otherwise, I can hit cancel and just leave everything alone, because that is a mistake. Unjoining would detach these two from each other. So currently, these two are working together, and they're wanting to stay joined. So if I move this column, same rules apply. It will try to unjoin them, which is fine here if I'm intentionally unjoining them. Otherwise, you can hit cancel and they stay together. So notice that architectural columns don't have that feature, and architectural columns don't have the additional tool set here that structural columns do. So that these architectural columns are completely different than these structural columns, when there may be some additional choices at the top of the screen here. Typically, they show up when you place the column. So placing a new structural column, you'll see the additional choices across the screen here. And that's my presentation for the column command in Revit. Please stay tuned for future videos, and I hope you liked the video presentation. Thank you.